Welcome back to another update to the Let's Get Tenure Achievement series. Unfortunately, I've been very busy with being an adult lately and have not had time to play video games. It would be a simple way of saying it. However, on Thursday, I was unable to avoid another binge round of Banished, which again has included completely starting over. At this rate, I probably will never get my achievement, but I did think it was worthwhile to create another update video and give you guys a walk around on my newest project, Moobaahpolis, Texas. The reason for this rebuild is that I have a long-term idea, which I don't know if it's going to work out. So what you're going to see here is not the way that the city is going to be structured in the end. The long-term idea I'm not going to talk a lot about because I'm still a little bit hazy on whether it will work, and I don't know if I've ever seen anyone else try something like it. But this video, I'm sure people have made similar ones. In looking at the number of pastures, as soon as we start here, some of you are going to immediately understand how this economy functions. So this economy is essentially predicated on cows and sheep. And I have found that if you're making warm coats, a ratio of about 2 to 1 cows for sheep is a nice balance so that you don't overproduce wool, and your leather and wool stay at approximately the same level. Having learned that, I turned the remainder of my pastures into chicken pastures just to create some extra food, but in reality these are unnecessary, or if I really wanted to, I would probably turn these into sheep and cow pastures. As I've showed in some other videos, this empty pasture is not an accident. What I do here is, if another pasture has a sickness, I transfer all of the animals out into the empty pasture and then immediately send them back. And what this does is it gets rid of the sickness very, very quickly and very easily, so you don't really have to micromanage your pastures, or you don't have to go in and kill them, or you don't have to worry about having 2 cow pastures right next to each other. It allows you to really centralize and make optimal use of your land. If we go ahead and look in the town hall, we can see that this is the spring of year 55. We have a total citizen base of 840. For tenure, I only need 500, so I'm probably not going to be expanding anymore. As I stop building houses, my population will begin to decline, and I expect it to probably level off somewhere around 500. It'll probably continue to grow here into the 900s or so. A really good way to tell if you're growing or shrinking is to look and see how many children you have. In this case, I have 170, and I have 543 adults. So optimally, if I wanted to be growing, I should have children. The number of children that I should have should be greater than 1/3 of 543. And 170 times 3 is less than 543, so that's telling me I'm starting to shrink. And that's okay. As I mentioned, we have clothed and educated rates of 100%. Everybody's very happy, very healthy. So the city overall is doing really well until we go into the production tab, and you can see that we are using 146,000 food in 1 year, and we are producing 28,000. So in simple terms, I need to be bringing in about 120,000 food every year from trade, or else I'm going to starve. That sounds a bit scary, but at the moment I have 350,000 in food, so I have about 3 years worth of food in the bank, meaning I could go 3 years without having to trade and I would still survive. With 10 trading posts, I have not had a problem maintaining this balance, but there is a bit of a problem with the auto trade, and I will take you in and show you that here in a minute. As far as the graphs go, you can see that we have largely been growing our food except for right here. This little dip on the right-hand side is when I enabled auto trade. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we're going to talk about that problem. Scaling back and looking at this at a 50-year view, you can see this massive spike, this massive drop right here. And this was the result of me literally not trading for a while. I wanted to see how quickly I could drop my food surplus, which is about 270. And then I wanted to see from, after I used up about 200,000 of it, how quickly could I go back up again? And I was able to see that, very quickly I could overcome my deficit and begin to put food in the bank again. So learning this gave me, in my opinion, a lot of flexibility. So I was a lot more confident in my trades. If we look at the population, you can see it's consistently gone up. But as I mentioned, I don't anticipate to continue to grow, so this will probably begin to dip off. And if you look at the population of the adults, it's already starting. And the population of the children, if we pop down into a 1-year window, is beginning to drop off. As far as nomads go, I have not accepted any nomads into the city at all. As far as trade items go, the only things that I have traded for are the cattle and the chicken. So I started with sheep, walnut, pumpkin, corn, and peaches. As I think I mentioned, this map is currently set to easy. You could easily do this on hard, but I kind of wanted to start with sheep and be able to start configuring my city very early without having to wait, 5 or 10 years to scrape that together. There's not a lot else I don't think that's worth commenting on. One thing that I think would be a benefit to most people is to look and see where these hospitals are at. And the hospitals, if you'll notice, are always set away from my houses and away from my jobs. The reason for that is if I were to build a hospital, say right here, there's so many people around here that the probability of them getting sick is much greater. So by putting your hospitals, kind of further out, it might take that sick person longer to get to the doctor, but once they are at the hospital, they're somewhat quarantined away from the rest of the population. And I really have not had any problems with sickness at all. Again, I'm not accepting nomads, so that obviously helps quite a bit. I have quite a few boarding houses scattered around the map. This is in case I have a fire or a tornado that destroys a lot of houses and I have some temporary housing available. We are using a flattening tool, so we're going through and we are essentially terraforming the map. You can see that this all used to be mountains, just like this. And you just kind of go right into the toolbar and you drag and it flattens. A cool thing about this tool is if you try to flatten this area, it won't flatten right away. Or for example, if I try to flatten this area, it won't flatten right away. And the reason for that is my laborers are going to have to go over here and remove any of the resources in the land, and then it will flatten. So here you can see that it's doing it instantaneously. That's because there are no resources in this little area, but the minute I drag and include some resources, it will make me send my laborers out. So it's a nice little tool, especially if you're trying to experiment like I'm doing here, and you really don't want to deal with, the natural landscape. You can also, for example, fill lakes in just like that. However, this lake is going to be very important to me because I'm going to start building trading posts on this lake. Now, I am fully aware that these trading posts are not going to receive any shipments. But what I'm going to be doing with these trading posts, and you can see right here, the flattening tool is awesome because I can go in, I can flatten just these few red tiles, and then I can go ahead and put my trading post here. So that really, really helps out on the riverfront side. But these trading posts are going to become banks. So what I want to do is probably have 200,000 or 300,000 food in these trading posts. And that way, if a tornado comes through and ravishes the rest of my city and destroys a ton of my food and a lot of my food jobs or a lot of my trading posts, I should have a couple years worth of the food deficit kind of stored away. And for example, if you look at stone, I only have 800. I'm going to want to get that back up to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 stone, just in case I have a major tornado that comes in and destroys 20 or 30 or 40 houses. I don't want to be in a position where I have to wait to purchase stone before I can start rebuilding. So rather than allow the stone to sit in these stockpiles that are in the middle of my city, I'm just going to have it all sent over here to the lake. I'll have extra coats, I'll have extra tools, I'll have extra food, and if any type of crisis comes in, I can just send some workers to those trading posts to withdraw those goods. I think that's about it. You can see really how advantageous this flattening tool has been. For example, the way that these trading posts are placed. It's kind of cool when the ships come in because they hide beneath these bridges, and it allows me to, for example, the way that I built this bridge, how it's kind of in front of this trading post. Things like this are not usually possible on a map unless you get right in and you flatten some of these shoreline pieces, and then it will allow you to just like this, build across. Other than that, there really isn't much to talk about. I did experiment on this map with two things that I had been talking about last week on Reddit and some of the threads. The first one was whether or not to educate early. I, coming into this, did not like that idea, and I've got to say, after doing it here, I still don't like it. It really greatly nerfs your potential growth in the beginning. It can be dangerous because my first class of students, as they were being educated, were unable to be put into food producing jobs, and it just so happened I needed, I was almost at zero food and ready to starve. So I was really waiting for those first kids to get educated. It just becomes a bit of a difficulty that I don't think you need to endure. And practically speaking, I didn't have a fully educated 100% rate until somewhere like year 30-something or 20-something. And quite honestly, the difference between, let's say, being in year 45 and having a 100% educated population versus being in year 45 and having an 82% educated population is really minimal, in my opinion. So what it allows you to do if you wait to build your school is it allows you to grow a lot quicker in the beginning, develop your initial city. This was my first market, so we started, right around this area here. However, one of the things that I did do here that I liked quite a bit was moving to stone houses right away. And I found that doing this seems to greatly save stone. So for example, I'm not building 100 wooden houses and then upgrading 100 wooden houses. So that in and of itself was a massive stone savings. But one of the reasons that worked so well is that this was on easy. And because it was on easy, I didn't have to build the initial houses or the initial storage barn. So that was a lot of stone that I saved, which allowed me to build trading posts earlier. And then because I had sheep, I was able to start building wool coats, or start producing wool coats, and sending them to the trading posts to begin buying stone right away. And in the early parts of the game, stone is by far the commodity that you need the most of. And if you look at my 50-year window here, let's set it to a 100-year window here, I have used 25,000 stone. The 6,200 stone that you see here was picked up off the ground. I've never built a quarry. I've never had a stone cutter. So you need to import a ton of stone, and especially if you look around and you notice that all the streets or all the roads are made out of stone as well. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense to be trading for anything other than stone until you reach a population of 150 in size. And the reason for the 150 is when you reach a population of 150, you will start receiving shipments that are maximum size. So in the very first couple years, you might get a stone shipment that's only 50 stone. And 50 stone is essentially one house. So I had 4 trading posts, and I told every one of the shipments, or every one of the ships, to only bring me stone if possible. I wasn't interested in food, I wasn't interested in iron or coal until much, much later in the game. And with that, I'd like to show you the challenge with the auto purchasing that I am currently facing. And it's pretty easy to overcome, and there's really 2 ways I can go about it. I'm either going to have to build more trading posts, or I'm going to have to continue to somewhat micromanage my trades. And let's see if one of these guys has some food. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the game. If you go in here, you'll see that I'm auto trading for 9,999 fruit, vegetable, and grain. I'm also trying to purchase 300 coal. This is my food ship. This is just for food, so I'm only bringing in fruit on this shipment because it's what I want to be using to make ale. But as you can see, there is a ton of food that was not purchased because I reached the limit of 9,999. So what this means is when you're running a 120,000 deficit, is that you need to go in and you need to manually purchase the rest of this. Otherwise, you're leaving food on the table, as it were. And it's okay to leave food on the table when your deficit is not 120,000 a year, but when you're leaving 40,000 or even 4,000 food on a ship like this, you can start to, it really starts to make sense when you look at my last 5 years of food and why things started to dip off. They dipped off because I wasn't going in for those years and purchasing the remaining food. So again, I'm either going to have to build a couple more trading posts, or I'm going to have to continue to micromanage, which I don't like to do. And I think the last thing we're going to talk about is the town hall has this inventory tab, and this is a great place to look and have it sorted by quantity. And what I'm seeing right now, for example, is that I have 70,000 cherries. So what this is telling me is one of 2 things. Either one, I'm going to want to build more taverns and start making more cherry ale, or I might want to go in and whoever's making apple, for example this guy, and switch him over to cherry. And what you really want to try to do is try to keep levels, right? Everything leveled off. So years ago, I was sitting at about 70 or 80,000 beef and 70 or 80,000 mutton. That 70 or 80,000 was taking up a ton of space in my storage barn, so it was really easy to start putting mutton and beef in my trading posts in purchasing vegetables, grains, and fruits. So, you can see that beef trades at a value of 3, so this 5,000 beef will be able to purchase 15,000 vegetables, fruits, or grains. I'm also doing that, I think, with eggs down here. So anytime I go into that town hall and I see that I suddenly have way more of one thing than another, it's telling me that, I really should probably be leveling it out somehow. This is a really good thing to monitor for wool and leather production. Right now I have 1,200 and 1,300, so it's about leveling off, but I know that this wool right here used to be about 900, so it's creeping up above the leather. And that explains why sometimes you see wool coats in my trading posts. It's pretty simple to just set one of my tailors to wool. They consume more wool. It uses that extra wool up. And then if I really start to get too high, I put extra wool, extra leather, extra coats in this one trading post. And this one trading post is not set to auto purchase. This trading post is still configured to only accept stone. So when I need to buy stone, this is where I'm purchasing stone from. All of the other trading posts are only looking for food, iron, or coal. So that's kind of the difference. So even though you do see 10 trading posts, a good way of thinking about it is that I really only have 2 types of trading posts. And that's about it for this update. I don't want to make it too much longer than it already is. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.